This episode is sponsored by Where to Shop and Dine. Download the app on Google Play Store or Apple App Store today. Connecting colleges and communities. You're watching Scene TV, and I'm Maya McNulty, Schenectady Cable Entertainment News and Events. I'm thrilled to have in the studio today Arthur Ambrosino. He is the Chief Engineer of Mines at the Great Sacandaga Lake. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you, thank you.
Arthur, it's such a pleasure to have you here, and you've literally dived into a project on the Great Sacandaga Lake. So let's talk a little bit about yourself and this project. So give us a little history about your engineering background.
Well, I built an awful lot of homes in the Sacandaga Basin. I built 20 homes and 5 camps, and all but one needed water wells. So I'm just a curious guy, I started studying water well tailings. And I was finding minerals that I thought were, shouldn't be there. And so it set me on to the passion I have right now, which is really beyond deepening the Great Sacandaga Lake. I'm trying to solve the worldwide freshwater crisis.
That's a huge project.
Yes. There's about 900 million people in the world that have no fresh water. And the UN projects in another 20 years there'll be 1.8 billion people with no fresh water. So
this is really serious.
This is real serious.
Yeah.
And so I grew up on the lake. I grew up at Greens Beach, which is very near the Northampton Beach State Campsite. And then when I married, my wife's family, bought a camp on Sunset Bay. So I know the lake really, really well, probably better than any living human being. And I've studied it way down to bedrock and all the mountains and everything that are shedding into it. And so I was sensitive to a lot of the angst and lawsuits and litigations that were going on way back in the 80s and 90s about the use of the water of the Great Sacandaga Lake. Should it be only for those who have camps around the lake and recreation, or for what it was designed? This is a man-made lake to ameliorate flooding in the Upper Hudson Basin, Upper Hudson River Basin, and keep the salt front down below Poughkeepsie, because there's about 3 million people drinking treated Hudson River water. And so in 1995, when the Federal Energy Research Regulatory Commission relicensed the E.J. West hydroelectric dam, which is part of hydroelectric power plant, which is part of the Conklinville Dam that was built to create the Great Sacandaga Lake, then I gave a paper then. I already knew then that there were even the minor minerals in the lake bed would pay completely for deepening it. And the Great Sacandaga Lake, as you know, is it's 42 square miles, but the majority of it, about 36 square miles, is only averages 13 feet deep. And each year they have to let out 25 feet of water to make room for the snow melt so they can ameliorate the flooding in the Upper Hudson River. So I gave a one-page paper to about 300 people at a hearing in Northville High School and said the solution to the navigational and fisheries and recreational and environmental problems of the Great Sacandaga Lake is to deepen it, and the minerals will pay for deepening it. And what came of that was they said, he's got a good idea, but we don't want to deepen it. We're going to raise the water level from 768 feet above sea level to 770 feet above sea level. The extra 2 feet will solve a lot of the navigation problems. And So they did that they were going to raise it 2 feet over 20 years. But by the time they get into the 7th or 8th year, they realized that raising the water level was undermining all the trees right around the edges of the lake. And so the trees would drop.
Yeah.
So they decided to stop doing that, and they went back to the historical full pond, which is 768 feet above sea level. So then I got to thinking, I can solve the worldwide freshwater crisis by sand harvesting minerals. Sand harvesting, by the way, is the only environmentally sound mining method. It's all gravimetric. There's no chemicals, and it's all done in closed 24-inch pipe systems, and that's what we'll do.
Sounds massive.
It is. If we were to deepen the Great Sacandaga Lake and do it in 20 years, we'd need 2 wash plants, which are 100 feet wide by 300 feet long by 4 stories tall, and a couple of big suction dredges with cutter heads on them to get down deep.
So is there such a thing as an underwater engineer?
Yeah,
there
is, because if you deepen the Great Sacandaga Lake, you have to, in the permitting process, which we're entering in a couple of years now. There's this thing, part of the permitting application, it's called reclamation. So you have to even design the bottom topography that you're going to leave after you deepen the lake.
This is really fascinating to me. We have a property up in Sacandaga. We've had it since 1996, and I could be a victim of the trees collapsing and waterlogging and the water going up so high and washing our furniture away and our girls away and stuff like that. So with this sand harvesting and the minerals, what part of the lake are you finding this? Is it on the north end, the south end? What part of the lake are you?
Well, if we talk about just the mineral wealth for a moment, the Great Sacandaga Lake is, the mineable portion of the lake is 36 square miles. It's a 42 square mile lake, but the Sacandaga River coming down from Wells past Northville and turning at Sinclair Point and going the 18 miles to the Concord Dam.
And that's where we are, we're in Sinclair Point.
Yes. That is already pretty much down to bedrock from the river.
Okay.
There are several other feeder streams, but you should know, the viewer should know that the mineral wealth is not just underneath the lake bed. The mineral wealth is in the whole of the 1,000 square mile Great or Sacandaga Basin. And the reason why the mineral wealth is there is because it's a relict, R-E-L-I-C-T, green schist facies belt. That it's relict because 1 billion years ago, the western edge of the Great Sacandaga Lake was the ancient North American continental shelf. Like, say, if you were thinking of Northville and Gloversville today, I mean 1 billion years ago, they would be like Boston and New York City today, the continental shelf. And so along this Grenville orogeny, which was aged at about 1.1 billion years to about 900 million years ago, all of the sediments have all eroded into the ocean, except for 4 along the whole Grenville orogeny, which starts in Nova Scotia, comes down through Ontario, the eastern edge of the Adirondack Mountains, all the way down the Appalachians, across Alabama and into the middle of Texas. That's the Grenville orogeny. And orogenies are when continents collide and subduct under one another.
We need a class on all this because it's over the top of my head.
Yeah, I know. I know. people, when I talk to people, I can see their eyes glazing
Yeah,
over.
we're lost.
But it's a
So-
relic. There are only
But it's
four.
very important information.
It's very important because
Yeah.
there are only four of these relict green schist facies along the Grenville orogeny. The one I discovered in the Sacandaga Basin, one in North Carolina, one in Ontario, and one in Nova Scotia. And they're highly mineralogic. Do you want me to tell the audience why?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, when you have, say, North America and Eurasia, and you want to think Europe mostly, think England and Scotland and Sweden and Norway. The rocks in those European countries are identical to the rocks in the Great Sacandaga Lake and
Oh,
the
that's
basin.
a great history right there.
And so it takes a couple of 100 million years for these continents to approach each other. They grow at the rate of fingernail growth, and then, or they move at the rate of, and then Eurasia subducts under North America, thickens the crust, creates volcanism all up and down the Grenville. So the Appalachians and the Adirondacks were at one time higher than the Himalayas are today, where India is subducting under Asia.
Hmm. And this is hence the water problem, so that you're trying to solve.
Well, no, it's this is background
With the
to
minerals,
why
okay.
the minerals are
Okay.
there. Yes. Well, anyway, so it takes a couple 100 million years for these continents to subduct, and then sometimes, and most times, they'll come back apart, and another couple of 100 million years goes by. But you get when you get this rift, when continents move apart, then you get the crust thickening, thinning, like taffy. And when it dries and gets cools and dries, then the last phases of the magma, the hydrous phases of the magma, contain all the minerals. So the Sacandaga Basin is loaded with these LCT, which are lithium, cesium, tantalum, and NYF, which are niobium, yttrium, fluorine, pegmatites, and that's why the mineral wealth is there. And so you want to think of the Sacandaga Basin, the whole of the basin, as being an ancient shoreline. That's what you want to think.
Okay.
It's been impacted several times by glacial epochs, and so you see a lot of relict geology from the glacial epochs, like drumlins and everything else, which are elongated hills of sand. That continental glaciation comes from as much as 300 miles away. The Great Sacandaga Lake at the mouth of the Sacandaga Basin was more severely affected by the valley glaciers, which always precede continental glaciation. And that's why you have these bands in the Great Sacandaga Lake of what they call moraines, where the valley glaciers plowed up all the rocks and they look like amphitheaters.
Yeah, I think I've seen that, like on Sand Island and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So some places in the lake have no rocks at all, and other places at the ends of these moraines have a lot of rocks.
So the deepening and the harvesting of the sand is going to help the mineral. And tell me about the cost of this, and then how did you discover this?
Well, I ask myself that all the time. That's the funniest thing about it, because the lake is over 80 years old now. They built the dam and made the lake in 1929, and I keep asking myself all the time, why me? Why hasn't anyone else taken a magnet down to the beach? I mean, if you take a magnet down to the beach, every time I show it to people, their mouths drop, because they never realize that it's got these magnetic and paramagnetic minerals in there, which are, some of them are highly valuable. And so
Are those minerals affecting the fishery and
No. No, they're quite safe as the minerals they are. Now, if you get into processing some of them, and I can tell you about that too, and I think maybe the audience should know there are 4 pools of money, and the money that I'm going to talk about today is only what the minerals are worth, not what the minerals can make for society, which makes it an enormous big find.
Sure.
But the Great Sacandaga Lake, for example, just the lake itself, I own the mineral rights to the mineable portion of the lake. The minerals are worth $1.8 trillion, and that's a very conservative number.
Mm-hmm.
In the whole of the Sacandaga Basin, where you don't have to fight down through these drumlins and you hit the Valley Glacier stuff, it's worth, the minerals are worth more than $40 trillion. So this is the biggest thing that's ever hit upstate New York. I mean,
Is that
maybe
like the lottery for you?
the Marcellus Shale formation with all the gas might have been a little bit bigger, but this is this is safe.
Mm-hmm.
This is not beleaguered by environmental problems.
How are you going to convert this minerals into economics, and
All right.
how's it affecting
So
the shorelines?
let's go back to these 4 pools of money. The first pool of money is I sand harvest the lake bed on these big with a big suction dredge. We call them sand harvesters. That's a legitimate name. And these big wash plants, and then you separate all the heavies and the lights that have value from all the stuff that doesn't. So in every 100 pounds of earth, about 10 to 12 pounds of the fine sands are going to have value. In the Great Sacandaga Lake, we have some mineral species that are so prolific that we'll destroy markets with them. In other words, that means we're going to have to store this stuff. Take for example, almandine. Now there's in Gore Mountain in North Creek, about 25 miles away, is a company called Barton, and they mine hard rock deposit of almandine. They control about 70% of the world market for almandine.
I didn't know that.
They have to blast the mountains, and they use it for they make different sized garnet. It's called almandine for sandblasting and for water filtration and stuff like that. Well, I've got 270 years worth of it, almandine, in the lake bed. So I'm going to give them all the almandine they want. They can stop blowing the mountain up there, and it's all glacially transported, so it's angular.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and anyway, in every cubic meter of heavies and lights, that 10 to 12 pounds per 100 that I'm going to collect sand harvesting, I can sell that in the open market for $300 to $700 per cubic meter. I take the heavies and the lights that have value onshore, and then I separate the minerals, the second pool of money. I separate all the minerals by species. So then I separate the magnetite from the ilmenite, from the 3 rare earth oxide minerals that are in there, from the 4 huge lithium minerals that are in there, and all the rest of the minerals. There's everything in there that you can think of.
Wow.
And now I can sell that group by species for anywhere from about $300 to $3,000 or $4,000 to about $7,000 or $8,000 per cubic meter. Now the third phase of money, which I'm not talking about the wealth of that, is when I got all these minerals separated by species, and I go ahead and process them, which won't be done anywhere near the lake, to extract the elements that are in them. Then I can sell those elements, some of them for $20,000 to $70,000 per metric ton.
Wow.
And some of these minerals, there'll be 2 to 3 metric ton per cubic meter. So it's a big, big deal. And you can see the amount of money, you take $40 trillion worth of minerals in the Sacandaga Basin and get it even just into the third pool. Then the fourth pool are the spin-offs, where you say you take the magnetite, it's a 65% iron. This magnetite's a high grade. And you process that 65% so that it's isolated, and then you make steel out of it. And so just in the Great Sacandaga Lake, we have, and there's a white paper I put on my website, we have 1 million metric tons of magnetite a year, and we can make about 700,000 tons of steel. And then in that same pool, we decide, well, what do I want to make? Re-rod, or want to make pipe, or do I want to make sheet steel? And then the next phase of that is, okay, I'm going to build wash machines with steel sides.
Well, you'll probably build barges
or
that
whatever.
have pipes to go out to the ocean so that you can filter water in all these countries.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know much more about the rest of the southeast of the Adirondacks. I do not think it's impossible to have this kind of mineral wealth in Lake George, but I haven't studied it. I've been focused on this.
So you own the rights of the ones at Sacandaga.
Yes.
And you're taking care of that. How is this all being funded? How's your research being funded? And tell us about that.
Well, I've done it all. And I've spent a lot of money at it. It took me about 7 years fighting with the state to perfect legally the term perfect, my mineral claims. The statutes are very, very old and archaic. And in fact, I'm the only person in the state who owns state lands mineral rights. And I worried, I kept quiet about this. I've been thinking, well, somebody's going to take it away from me, you know, and all that. But now I've renewed the statutes are for 30 months, so I have them all lined up. I renew them. They're not all at once, but it costs me a little bit of money to keep the mineral rights. There's a maintenance fee to them, and right up until recently, before maybe about a couple of years ago now, some guy got a hold of me, a billionaire from Canada. He wanted to fund the whole thing and become partners with me. So I believed him, and we went on for a couple of years like that. It gave me a lot of courage, you know.
Of course.
Thinking,
got to get out of your comfort
well, I got
zone.
a billionaire here, and I'm going to start this thing right away. And but then I guess he turned out, you know, I mean.
Well, it's a big project, and not everyone understands it in depth as you do.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the other visionary that you'll see with this, with enhancing the lake for boating and activity and the fishery and all those kinds of things too, that people are actually, they can relate to, because this part, it's so much deeper with the mining, and it's, you know, hard to comprehend. And plus, would we even see that in our lifetime?
Oh, yeah. I don't think the shoreline property owners or anybody would put up with a project more than 20 years, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But look, the lake averages 13 feet deep, and it's all sand, so it gets a lot of sun reflectance. In the summertime, it gets up to 85 degrees. There isn't a fish really that can live in that unless they go to the deeper waters along the Sacandaga River. And there wouldn't be any fish in there hardly, because the lake is essentially sterile. And the reason is because they draw so much water out. Now, everywhere on Earth, on continental edges or lakes, the animals that live in there, the fish and biota, they like to spawn near the shorelines. So what do? They spawn, although stockfish don't spawn very well. And the midges that feed them bury their eggs and whatever in the shoreline. Well, what do? Then they drop the water down by 25 feet so everything freezes in the wintertime. It kills everything.
Yep.
So that's why the lake is sterile. The lake at full pond, right up to the top now, is 280 billion gallons of water. And you can find that data. Anybody that lives on the lake should be familiar with the USGS site. You go to the Conklinville Dam. It's called Water Data. It's 01323-500, and if you punch those numbers in, you'll come to the USGS site, and you can see the historical curve that they settled on in 1995, based on raising the water level by 2 feet, like I told you early in the interview. So if I deepen it, I'm going to create another 400 billion gallons of water in the lake. And
what part of the lake are you looking to deepen?
Well, it's everything from on the north west side from the Northampton Beach State Campsite down to Mayfield, across to Broad Auburn, and up to Fayetteville, which is near Sinclair Point. So it's about 9 miles. Of course, it's all jagged, and streams feeding into it. But I always think of it like 9 miles by 4. So that's the 36 square miles that can be deepened. And so another thing about the shallowness is that if with deeper water, every year the lake is going to cool more and more and more and more. Every year we'll remove, like almost 2 square miles of sediment from the bottom of the lake.
Are the minerals helping to keep it cooler? Or do
No.
the minerals need to live in that cooler in order to grow?
No.
Okay.
No, there's no mineral growth there. This is all stuff that's been shed 1 billion years ago, and stuff that the glaciers have brought into the lake, into the Sacandaga Basin. But we'll cool that water right down, and we'll then be able to support trout and anything else we want to put in it. But not only that, the shallowness, and when they draw it down in the fall, the high water mark, or the water contained after they draw that 25 feet, is only about 120 billion gallons of water. So you've got 4 or 5 waste treatment systems in Broad Auburn, Mayfield, Northville, Sacandaga Park, dumping sewage or treated sewage into the lake. Well, then the lake becomes very polluted in the wintertime, and this will solve all that. And another big thing is navigation. I mean, even in the historical curve, by the time you get to the end of the season, the summer season, the lake is too shallow for navigation. You can only have small boats on the lake.
Yeah, I'm a victim of losing my prop several times. So
Yeah.
now I have backup ones. Little tip. The economic benefits and the community benefits. Briefly tell us about that and some of the environmental benefits. I know that's a big nut there, but let's talk about that.
Well, the state is paying attention to me. They know me. I know all the regulators and everything, and it's had impact. The deepening project has had impact in the smallest of ways. Well, they're still important. Like, for example, the new Bachelorville Bridge that was just built. They had originally designed it to have only 13 feet of clearance, like the new Northville Bridge. And I said, no, I'm going to deepen this lake, and we want to have some big boats on this lake. It's 42 square miles, and all we can have is 15, 20-foot boats on it. And so they listened to me, and now there's an arc in it, and it's 39 feet clearance. So
it's beautiful.
Yeah, so it's a big deal, and and I told you about the impact I had in 1995 when they decided to raise the water level by 2 feet. They thought it was a good idea even back then, but so the economic benefits are just astonishing. Like,
well, it's also increased tourism and other boats coming on the.
Well, I'm sympathetic to the quiet enjoyment of people that live on the lake, and I'm not trying to make the Great Sacandaga Lake another Lake George or something even bigger. I think that what I really dearly want is a dialogue with all the shoreline property owners. So last year I sent my first letter out to them, and I sent another one out.
How can we get in touch with you? How can they get in touch with you, the shoreline owners? Do you have a website?
Well, people can't get in touch with the shoreline property owners unless they do the research.
No, how can they get in touch with you, though, to maybe help you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a website, www.gsl-deepening.com, and then I have my email address, which is ama2002@columbia.edu, and they can call me at my cell phone, 562-537-1902.
Great, and you'll take any of those messages, any of those calls.
Yeah.
So it's all a great interest for the community. So that's fantastic. About the environment, I've noticed with having more traffic on the lake this particular year, actually this past summer, there's been a lot of littering, and how's that affecting the lake and people? I mean, they need to start cleaning up after themselves.
Well, yeah, but I'd like to stay out of that because I don't know what it is that makes people so dumb to do that.
Sure.
But they do it everywhere. And I don't know why they don't realize that everything goes to the oceans, and all water drains to the ocean. So, people better wise up. This is serious stuff.
Yeah. I don't want to run out of time. Let's talk about some of the challenges that you had, maybe with the Black River Association, any type of state. I know you probably had a lot, and it's probably this thick. But
in the beginning, they ignored me pretty good. That's what the state does. But now they don't ignore me.
Well, this is very important, and especially that it's trillions and trillions of dollars that you can harvest from the deepening with all these minerals, and then actually convert them into jobs and economic and community, and so it's a huge deal.
Yeah, it is a huge deal. It'll be the next at least 100 years of industry in Fulton County, and the adjacent cities like Amsterdam and Saratoga. They're also going to benefit greatly. The first letter I sent out to the shoreline property owners around that portion of the lake that can be deepened, there's 600 of them, and about 50 own more than one piece. So they're only, I'm only considering that there's 550 owners. And I mailed.
Has it been a challenge? Those are some of your challenges of wanting more people want in?
Well, it's not a terrible challenge because I haven't had any negatives. And the reason is because we've set aside, I have a team, we've set aside $20 billion for the 3 little villages around the lake and the shoreline property owners. The shoreline property owners will get $8 billion, and that adds up to about $250,000 a piece per year.
So basically, this is the ability to go and start deepening in that area.
Yeah, and
they're being compensated.
This deepening is not going to affect their beaches. It's not going to affect their boating, except for where I'm deepening. And so if I'm deepening up by the Northampton Beach State Campsite, nobody's going to see me for years over in Broad Alban.
That's what I was saying, the timeline.
It's 9 miles by 4 miles wide. This is a big lake. And so I said, if it takes me 20 years, I'll give you $250,000 per year per shoreline property owner.
So this is coming from your funding. It's not a state funding. It's
no,
not.
this is going to be paid for by the minerals.
Right.
I mean,
the profits
even
from
a
that, yes.
very, very small sand harvesting operation anywhere in the Sacandaga Basin is going to make $3-4 million a year. The mineable portion of the Great Sacandaga Lake is 22,000 square acres, though, contiguous square acres. And in all of Fulton County, there are only 12 properties over 200 acres each. So, you know, but even if some farmer wants to do some sand harvesting, if he's got any water on his property and he wants to do some sand harvesting, he can make $3-4 million a year. These minerals are so important and so critical.
Right. And
now,
if you
not
don't
all
have,
the minerals are usable, because some of them, the markets are so small, and there's so much mineral in the lake. So out of the $1.8 trillion worth of minerals, valuable minerals in the lake bed, maybe 900, maybe 900 billion, maybe $1 trillion are marketable tomorrow.
Right. And then now those are shoreline properties. How about backlot properties? Is there
Backlot
compensation
properties
for
get
them?
$125,000 each, and $125,000 each year, and then the rest of it we set aside for, say, fiber optic cable in the 3 villages, and once we start making money, the community should benefit.
Sure.
I'm an altruist and a philanthropist, and I don't need much. I don't need this kind of money. I want it to stay here in upstate New York. So,
what's your timeline? When do you think you're going to get this all started, or is it in the
well,
go right now?
right now I'm in the process of trying to buy a small piece of property for a storefront, because I want to have a better presence on the lake. I've got several pieces in mind, and in the storefront I'll have engineering offices, a conference room for maybe 40 to 60 people, a laboratory, and a geoprobe. A geoprobe is like a driller that takes cores. You put down an outer core, and then you go in and take the sample out. And we need to know a lot more about the basin.
That's really cool. You know,
Yeah.
you can almost have a museum type of thing with some of the minerals, and
Oh,
it
yeah.
could be a tourist
Yeah,
attraction.
well, that's-
so
that's
they
true.
can educate them.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Education, I think, is definitely probably the missing link here.
Yeah, it is.
And getting that voice out to the community so how they can get involved.
Well, so in the first letter, this is just to the shoreline property owners, because I think they're critical to applying for a permit, and I'll explain that in a minute. The first letter I sent, I got 40 responses in the first year, all positive, no negatives. This second letter has only been out about a month, maybe a month and a week, and I've got 17, all positive, no negative. So I'm up to 57. Well, now if I got to get 400, I think, before I feel comfortable to apply for a permit to deepen the reservoir, it's going to take me 8 years. So you're asking about the timeline. I need a presence there so that more people realize that we can actually do this. But in the meantime, there's other ways to get started. I believe that I can get a permit in 3 years. I may be the only person that
To expedite it that quickly.
can expedite it, because I know all the players, and I've worked out all the details, so that or my team and I have worked out all the details, so not even an environmentalist can complain, because we've got it all covered.
So that's good that you're going to overcome that
but you know,
obstacle,
it's a tough one. The tough part is to get the policymakers to join you, because anything that has the word mining in it, everybody's scared to death of it. So, we have to educate. You're right.
Yeah.
It's education. We have to
I
educate
think so.
them.
You need some seminars and some education.
Yeah,
To
yeah.
have a building and some presence there, and,
Yes.
maybe even Northville, because it's right between everything.
Yeah.
And it's easy to get to. That would be great.
Yeah.
I want to thank you, Arthur, so much for being on Scene TV. It was
We're
fantastic.
all done? That was quick.
Yeah, I told you would have a great time. I told you it'd be a lot of fun. Your story is really moving. It's so important. Absolutely, with water, we need it. It's essential. And mining, it's going to change the world. So thank you so much, Arthur Ambrosino. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Thank you.